Hi, everybody. It's Robbie here from Miscellaneous Candor, frank, honest, and otherwise outspoken. This week, we have a long episode. Yes, we went almost an hour and a half. We have a guest, actually one of Steven's friends named Tim. We talked about podcasts. We actually also talked about AI and healthcare with relation to what happened, that unfortunate tragedy with the United Healthcare CEO. And then we had a conversation about DEI. And Stephen and Tim had some really interesting takes. I weighed in a little, but I really wanted to hear what they had to say. So sit back, enjoy, relax. Definitely, if you have to listen to this one in a two-part series type of way, that's fine too. But just remember, follow us, subscribe, and please leave reviews. All right, here we go. Welcome back, everyone. It's Robbie, here your host for Miscellaneous Candor, frank, honest, and otherwise outspoken. Today we have a guest, and guess who is going to introduce him? Steven?
Hello, my friends. It is I, Steven Kennedy, your number one resident board certified atheist at your service. Was that good, Robbie? Do you approve of that, or is that not okay with you?
I mean, you know how I feel, so I don't know why you're asking. Can we introduce our guest
Perfect.
for our audience?
Perfect. So, people, my friends, I just wanted to introduce you to a special guest of ours. His name is Tim. Tim is actually a close friend of mine, so we're happy to have him on. We kind of have parallel minds, so we just kind of it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think. Tim's an HR. He runs HR at a prominent company in a blue state, and we wanted to have Tim on because we are going to be talking about DEI in this conversation under the current events topic, and he will have. It'll be great to get his insights on DEI because of his role in his work. Um, and I think it's going to be a colorful conversation. So thank you, Tim, for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, Tim, glad to have you. This would be definitely an interesting conversation, everyone, when we get to the current event section. So hang on. But first, let's talk about podcasts for the week. All right, I have a confession to make, Stephen.
Oh wow. You
I
did not
know,
listen to it. You didn't listen to the podcast.
I know, audience. I know, Tim. I was supposed to listen to what is this podcast that Stephen likes? Bad Friends. I finally got him to listen to a podcast, and I have not listened to it. So this is my second week down for the count. I'm sorry. I was just a lot going on. Stephen and I had to travel.
Uh huh.
God,
Yeah.
I know. I know.
We've all got our lives, Robbie. It's just we got to make time for what's important. It's kind of critical here, but that's okay. It's okay.
No, just
Um,
go in harder. Let's just get it over with. Get it over with.
Tim, have you heard of the podcast Bad Friends?
I have. Is that with I forget his name, the Asian comedian guy from
Yeah,
and the
Bobby.
Santino, yeah,
Bobby.
Bobby and Santino, I think it is.
Yeah. It's so good. It's so good. I knew you would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually did listen to a podcast, which it's the one that you sent me, Robbie. It's
You listened to the one, the Diary of the CEO, with the
yeah,
lady
Diary of a
about
CEO with
how
Steve
you can have
Bartlett.
20 different types of orgasm.
So
Whoa.
this is my question, and Tim, have you heard of this podcast, Diary of a CEO with Steve Bartlett?
I haven't, but I gotta look that up.
Okay, so Robbie sent me one episode where he's got a guest on named Susan Bratton, and apparently she is a sex therapist slash expert, and she claims there are 20 different types of orgasms. Now, I want to know who made her the authority on determining how many different types of orgasms a woman can have.
Well, wait, did you listen to the actual whole episode?
Not the whole thing.
Okay.
Not the whole thing.
See, that's the thing. You have to listen to the whole thing. And here's the thing. Let me preface this audience as to why I sent this to Stephen. First of all, you all know I listen to Diary of the CEO all the time. So it popped up because I was like, oh my goodness, okay, this is what he's talking about this week. Secondly, if you may have remembered from previous episodes, Stephen was on this whole I'm on this app where I'm going to be trying to hook up with threesomes and have all of this polyamorous blah blah
Which,
blah stuff.
which,
So I
which are
figured if he's gonna go down this road, he needs some tools in his toolkit so he's just not out there flailing. So that's why I sent you that, Steve.
so. Number one, I actually am going to report back to you in our next episode on my progress with that app. And second of all, what this podcast episode that you sent me with Steve Bartlett, it reminded me that I am so happy that I'm not married because I listened to the problems that these married people have. It's
Wait,
absurd.
wait.
Hmm.
Tim, you're married, aren't you?
I am married.
Okay. So calm down, Stephen.
All right. So let me ask you something, Tim. Do you find your sexual life in a lull?
That's really personal. Just kidding.
I
You don't have to answer that, Tim.
What,
You push
how many
back,
years have you been
push
married for?
back on him. You
No,
don't
I'm kidding. I've been
How many
married
years?
for 4 years.
4 years.
okay.
Okay.
That's great. Do you have any
5 years
kids?
now. No kids.
Okay. No kids. 4 years.
Look,
Um,
I think it's different when you are living that young bachelor life in the 20s and 30s in a city. Uh, it's different when you get older and when you are married. It's not to say that it's not good. It's just different.
exactly. And
But I
also,
don't know I mean, if it's like that Friends reference. Is it good different?
Well, I think at your stage, you're still in a good place. But say 20 years down the line, it seems like people are just miserable and they don't know how to turn each other on. Probably even 10 years down the line, they don't know, they're not turned on by each other yet. You know, again, this goes back to the fact that I think we're all animals. We're not meant to be monogamous, right? We're just animals. We're supposed to be having sex with every random person out there. We're not supposed to be sticking ourselves to one other human being. It doesn't make sense.
okay. I'm going to chime in here for a minute and say that while you could have a point, I think you are always on the far extreme of your points.
What would give you
Being
that idea?
out there in the freaking, as you would say if we're animals, tundra, quote unquote, sticking it into everything. I don't think that that is what everybody wants. I think
Tim, would you like to stick it in everything?
lean into that and say that
Well,
of the 6 billion people or whatever amount of billion people that are on this earth, not everyone wants to do that, Steve.
that's true. Um, I agree with that. But in life, there's more than just sex, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank
Tim, let's just pretend
you.
your wife is not going to listen to this podcast. Let's pretend. I
Let's
just
not
I
pretend that,
I,
Stephen.
I just think if we go back to the old times, right back hundreds, thousands of years ago, people did not have the kind of longevity that we do today. People lived, back thousands of years ago, they lived 25 years old, right? They died very young, and then up until recently, it was like 60s, right? And up to a certain age, it made sense. Okay, hey, I can survive, married to someone for 7 years and then die. Great. But now we're living so long, and it's just not a realistic expectation that people are going to stay monogamous and not have any sexual problems. I mean, it's a whole the the more we expand our lifespan, the more issues there are going to be, not just sexual, but overall.
Okay, so here's the thing. I just want to weigh in here, and I
I
really
should
want
be
to
a
hear
sex
Tim.
therapist. I should be a
Okay,
sex
maybe
therapist.
you want to be, but let's. I really want to hear Tim's perspective on this because he's the only one on the show who's married. So even if I give you your point, Stephen, right? Just because people are choosing maybe not to be quote unquote monogamous, there's a lot of value to being married and to being in a long term committed relationship. And she talked about that. I don't know if you heard that. I don't know if you heard the part where she talked about on the podcast how they were married, how she stopped having
Yeah,
sex with her husband,
yeah.
how he went out and he cheated on her, but she didn't look at it as him cheating. She looked at it as she was not providing a part of her marriage to her husband, who she thought was great. And he was seeking that outside of the marriage, but everything else was still good. So, what could she do to ensure that they reignited that, which is what was the basis for her becoming a sex therapist? But
Can I just
she never poo pooed on being married. I know you have something to say, Stephen, but can we let Tim have a little
sure?
bit?
I just want to jump in for 1 second and
Stephen,
correct me, Tim,
go!
if I'm wrong. It
Stephen,
sounds like okay. Yeah, go
Stephen,
ahead, Tim. Please
Stephen,
contribute. Sorry.
Tim.
Sure, yeah. What's up?
What do you think about like just the institution of marriage? Even if you don't call it an institution, but you are married. You like being married, I would assume. So
Yeah, I mean, I maybe I'll look at it different. Like you when you're younger, you have some appetizers along the way, and now you have
Appetizers.
combined main entree and dessert, which is pretty satisfying. I mean, appetizers are great, but I like the entree and the dessert combo. So for me, I think it's great and fulfilling. Now, I think outside of that, there's all this, the partnership, the communication, the trust, that I think are more important. I think as you get older, those things do become important. But I don't know. We have to see what I'd be thinking in 10 years, 15 years. I hope I wouldn't want to go back to appetizers.
I will say, just taking a step back here, Tim, you are very fortunate that you have a wonderful wife. I'm not so sure if she if she's so fortunate. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But I do want to say, you listen to this woman, Susan Bratton, and it sounds like she's, you know, not the ideal wife because she's saying, "I don't blame my husband for going out and cheating on me." That sounds fantastic.
I mean, some people say that when they enter this open relationship, that it actually makes their marriage or current relationship even better.
Yeah, yeah, that would be. Well, see, I don't know if that would work for me. It's just kind of weird. I'm a one woman kind of guy, so if I'm with someone, you know, yeah, but again, long term, I don't know what it'd be because we're animals, right? So it goes back to my initial argument. But Robbie, I knew you were in a long term relationship, right? And we still have to catch up on this because you are no longer. Is that correct?
I am in a relationship in transition.
I don't know what that means.
And that's why we're not going to talk about it on the podcast
I think
today.
we should talk about this. Is very interesting.
Yeah.
No, we should not, considering where I'm sitting in my home.
But
Really good.
one question though. So how long was your relationship before the transitional stage?
Um, I don't know, maybe 15 years.
Oh wow. So I mean, that was practically married.
If you talk about start to finish. Yep.
So what was it like for you?
I you know,
Oh, Robbie, don't get shy on us now.
no, I'm not. I
You
just
know, Tim's sitting here opening up, and I feel like you're being a little timid.
I'm not being timid, guarded. as I normally am,
I feel
probably.
like you're getting a little angry. Are you getting angry?
No, no, I'm not getting. How can I get angry at you when it's you and I know you're going to say something ridiculous? Um, no, I just think that, you do have to work on things. I was married for a short period of time before this long relationship, which is why I didn't get married in the long relationship. So that's something that I will say. Um, and when I was married, that's when I had my daughter. And then I got divorced, and that was very difficult. And the situation around the divorce was very difficult because it was something that it was not foreseen. It wasn't your normal situation where it was someone that, cheated or like it was a dangerous situation or it wasn't that. It was a health issue in terms of why I needed to remove myself from my husband, and it was something that couldn't be changed without going into a lot of detail.
Mm. How
Um,
long? How long was that marriage?
hmm?
How long was that marriage?
5 years.
Okay.
Hmm.
Hmm. So, and that was very, very difficult because if what happened did not happen, I had envisioned seeing myself married to that person forever.
Hmm.
So it was very, very difficult. And because of that, when I did get into the other relationship, I did not want to get married because it was a thing. Well, yeah, it was a thing where, as I said, you couldn't have foreseen it. It was something from a medical and I will say mental health type of issue, and the person didn't want to get any sort of help for it. So that it was sad, which is why I don't like talking about it. And this is supposed to be a fun, upbeat podcast, Steven.
This is a safe place. It's just the three of us, Robbie. We can talk.
But yes, so from that perspective, that's my lens. But I will say that, I believe that people can have good marriages, but I also do think, to your point, Stephen, that people can create marriages that work for them. And that's what I heard from Susan is her and her husband Tim have created a marriage that works for them. And marriage gets to a point, having had been married before, where there are just some things where you communicate and you have it could be really small, minute circumstances and situations that can tie you to this person in a way that you're not necessarily tied to someone that you wouldn't be married to. And those things can inform how you're going to move forward if you want to keep the relationship. And that can just be between you two.
Hmm.
I mean, when you do get married, I think one of the biggest things, like when I had a kid, was being able to call him my husband, and hear him call me his wife. There's something about that kind of changes the dynamic in your relationship that you can't explain unless you're in it.
Oh shit, we're getting deep now. We're getting deep.
You wanted to go here.
You're right. You're right.
Okay,
No, that's good.
so
That's good.
we are at 17. We did talk about Diary of a CEO.
What? So I really
I
quickly,
want
I
to
just wanted
share
to mention
this.
really quickly. I just wanted to mention that I don't think this podcast would help me with the app where you do threesomes and foursomes because that's exciting, fresh stuff. It's not about, you're not dealing with still marriage. So, but again, I do need to investigate the 20 orgasm thing, and I will report back about the app, the threesome, foursome, fivesome app.
Please do. And also too, you need to listen to the whole podcast with her because she talks about all these different toys and things, and you probably want to figure that out too.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, let's transition. AI. I know a big thing that we wanted to talk about today was AI in healthcare and tools that are used to deny policies, right, Stephen?
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Ah.
So, I think everyone's aware of the murder of the United Health CEO Brian Thompson, which happened a few days back, and the reaction that the public has been having online is very interesting. It's not all sadness. It's not, uh, it's a mixed bag. There are a lot of people that are very asympathetic, and a lot of people are happy about it. So there's a lot of interesting emotions because you do have people that have dealt with United Healthcare and they've been rejected. Their claims have been rejected when they're in a really dire situation where they needed that coverage. Um, and one thing that really stuck out, and this relates to AI, is that there's a criticism that United Healthcare, uh, there was a lawsuit against United Healthcare alleging that the company used artificial intelligence to deny coverage to some elderly patients who are on Medicare Advantage plan, despite allegedly being aware that the algorithm has a 90% error rate.
Wow.
That's ridiculous. And and let me read this. Let me read further. The lawsuit alleges that the provider continues using the system because it knows that only about 0.2% of policyholders will appeal their denied claims, and that a majority will either pay out of pocket costs or forego the remainder of their prescribed post-acute care.
Okay, so I have one question about that lawsuit. One, is that just information that you saw on Instagram, or is there a true source? Like, did you look at the lawsuit?
Oh, it's all over. It's all over reliable sources.
Okay. Did you
Usually,
actually read the lawsuit itself, though?
I
Like,
no, I did not read the
violate?
lawsuit document.
Okay. All right. Just wondering.
So, in again, this is a lawsuit that there's no resolution at this point. It's still open. The case is still open. So, if this actually is true, it is disgusting, and this is why we need, when we're having a company involved with direct patient care, I feel like we really need more government regulation for these companies. You've got, yeah, it's a public company. There's a lot of pressure for them to turn a profit to bring back to their investors, but there has to be regulations saying you can do this, you cannot do this, you can only maximize profit by this much. So I think it's disgusting that, if it's true that they're taking advantage of helpless elderly patients to make money. What do you guys think? And if it is the case, I also don't necessarily feel bad that this guy got killed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to. Well, I'd like to think that I'm a person who has empathy. At least it was a top five strength in my Strengths Finders 2.0 test, if you've ever taken that. But I will say this: like, I was surprised. I was not outraged. I'll put it that way. When this guy was killed, I'm not saying that he deserved it, but I think my empathy was out of network,
Hmm.
just like they
Clever,
do to us on
clever,
insurance.
clever, clever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's other things too, right? I think having been someone, and actually quite recently, we've been getting, denied on some insurance claims that it's supposed to be covered, and then they come up with something saying it's not, or then you spend the money to reach your deductible, and then they tell you, oh, actually, what the services you that have been rendered do not go towards your deductible. So then you wonder, what the hell am I even paying for? Like, why am I paying for insurance?
Do
So
you
I
have United Healthcare too?
I do not have United. It's a competitor to United. No, it actually is United. It is. So I have just
Oh,
found, like, why, like, what are we paying for? Um, why is it that when I get the services rendered, they don't go towards the deductible? And then the third thing is, like, when you call these call center agents, I think part of the anger and just frustration that we've had is you get this call, it's like offshore to like the Philippines or India. Some of them don't speak English that well. They put you on long hold, waiting times. They give you like a standardized rejection. There's no like sense as to like, why is this not getting covered? That they haven't received payment, or that the provider has said that, that it's covered, but they're saying it's not. So I can see why people are angry. I
Yeah,
really do. And I think they
yeah,
just kind of beat you down in a way where who has like an hour, 2 hours during the day
right.
only working from 9 to 5, and you just get worn out, and then you say, screw it, I'll just pay the bill. I mean, this goes
Yeah.
to, like, Steven's point around, what is it, 0.2%
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, so I mean, it's like, man, you just don't want to fight it anymore. You're just exhausted, and you
Yeah.
keep doing this throughout the week. It's and then, this guy, who was killed. I mean, he's was also under investigation for, I think, insider
Yeah.
trading, and
Yeah.
he's making tens of millions of dollars a year, not just him, but the rest of the executive team. So it is a really messed up system. I'm
Yeah.
not saying he deserves it. I'm sure he was a good father and a husband, but
Oh,
something.
blah blah blah. Look, I mean, that's great and all. You're a good father, but that kind of goes with the territory of having a family. You're good to your family, but how do you treat others outside of your family is also uh, pretty important, especially when you're in this kind of role. So, do you guys think that this is a justified killing and it served as a good message? Do you think it served a
No,
purpose?
I don't think it was a justified killing.
I
I don't
agree.
think that anyone should be murdered in cold blood because a system that is set up and being managed and or manipulated and taken advantage of for someone to profit on. This CEO, he was doing that, insider trading, all of that. It's not his fault. He's just at gotten an opportunity to be at the top of.
Oh,
Let's happen. Something's happening
we
here.
lost Robbie.
Uh-oh.
Just really back in a sec.
Okay,
There
I'll
you
be
go.
back. Here I am. Here I am. He's just taking advantage of a system that's set up in a fucked up way.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, and I there's uh, eh, you and I both know, Stephen. A lot of people do insider trading,
Oh, yeah.
right? So let's be clear on that part. So there's that right there as a foundation.
Nancy Pelosi.
Really, what
Nancy
no,
Pelosi.
I'm not okay. No, I'm not talking about Nancy Pelosi, but yes, we know that. I mean, that's out there. I should say this allegedly. I'm saying that on the podcast. That's alleged, right? But I'm not talking about her. What I am saying is that there's no, in my mind, there's no reason that somebody has the right, particularly in this country, to just walk up and plan and kill somebody in cold blood. I don't care for whatever reason. I don't. I
Yeah.
I'm saying this even as someone who has a kid who, if somebody hurt my kid, that would probably be the first thing I would want to do to them, particularly how it happened. But you just can't do that because there are laws and things against that. And from my perspective, as my personal moral belief, I don't abide by that in this situation. We're not talking about a war. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about targeting one individual who
Well,
was.
yeah.
I don't agree. Can't say it. No, it was not a justified murder.
I
So,
agree.
well, here's what about all these murders that are happening across the world every day? In Asia, in Africa, people
None of
die
those
for.
are justified either. That's my point. That's why
Oh,
I can't sit up here
yeah.
and say that this is. I
Okay.
know that's not justified. What's fucked up is the system. And yes, I will say this. The second part that you said is true. I do think that because this man lost his life and was murdered in cold blood, that it has set a message to the system and to
Exactly.
the teams. However,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's gonna what they're going to do. If they're just going to double down and hide shit in legalese, or if they're actually going to try to make some changes and stop, effing around and denying people over bullshit.
Well, now these companies are going to spend millions of dollars to protect their executives, so now our premiums are going to go up.
Yeah,
There's that.
that's
And
It's kind of ridiculous. That
right.
part is, like, maddening. I do think, like, when you look at United Health's values, and every company likes to have these bullshit core values, like, oh, we care about integrity, and I think one of the things that they talked about is they want to achieve their mission of expanding access to affordable, quality healthcare. They're not really living up to their mission and vision and values. I think that's what's causing this anger. I do think it's some people protest. In this case, maybe this guy's protest was to kill him, to shed light on it. I'm not saying it's right; it's bad, but who knows what might have happened to his mother or his child. I mean, he have, like, bullet casings. that said the
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
I
deny
don't know if
and
that's true though. Is that true that it had that deny
Yeah.
something?
I think it is, yeah. Yeah. Deny, defend, and depose were the words.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's some book that someone wrote about the healthcare system that
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Do you think
you
they're gonna
know,
find her like this week, or at least have an identity, or you don't think?
I think isn't it fascinating that they don't have an identity of the person? But why? What bothers me is that all these other people across the world being murdered, uselessly being murdered for no reason. These innocent people. Why don't they get this kind of attention? On the news stations.
I
That's what.
agree with you on that one. You're not going to lose me on that one.
Well,
I 100%. But the reason why is because we as in this culture, as in this country, are so enamored and put on the pedestal. People who make a lot of money,
yeah,
people who we deem quote unquote as successful because they have a certain title, a certain position in life, and based upon, who they are. Thus, that's what we define as value. Now, I say this as a consensus as a whole. I'm not talking about what personally people feel. You and I are talking about this. Yeah, that's bullshit.
yeah.
Uh, and Tim, I know you'd agree with me on this. It would be amazing if we could have a purge day.
Oh
Do
my
you agree? Do
God.
you agree? Do you agree?
God, ethically, that's not
No, no,
good.
no, no. Tim, be honest with me. Just pretend it's me and you talking. Would you?
I think there's going to be some people
Continue.
that might want to kill me because they don't like something that I said. So no.
I'm sure there are a lot of people that want to kill you.
Why? I feel like I'm a
You-
nice guy.
you-
Sometimes I say things that
Tim would have to run and hide
especially in
really
this
fast.
political environment that we're in. Even if you're well intended, but sometimes you get passionate. Someone can get mad and be like, I'm going to kill that guy. I'm like, why? They should go after like the actual criminals. Yes, or everybody that's guilty in prison. Yeah, go after them. But I don't know about a societal purge.
Well, a lot of people that should be in prison, don't go to prison. For example, our president,
So let's
Well,
our
okay.
future, our
We're
future
not talking
president.
that. We're gonna get there soon. Just hold
Right.
your horses. But
Okay.
this whole purge thing. This is my question to you. See, a lot of people like, oh, you need to do the purge and all of this stuff. Like, it sounds so good and provocative to say, but my question to you, Stephen Kennedy, because I think I know the answer, is: Are you ready? Are you locked and loaded for a purge? Are you
Robbie,
ready to go
I
in
am
and
I am gonna be balls out,
you
busting.
said
I'm gonna
going?
be out there with
I
my
said
machete.
now.
wait, if you're a Democrat, are you pro-gun,
If
Steven?
there was a purge day, yes.
Okay.
Um, it's like a dark turn. But I do think yes, Tim is not someone that would want a purge day because there would be a lot of people coming after him. You know,
What?
masses coming after him
No
with
way.
pitchforks and machetes and
That's terrible.
Oh my God. Tim, are you ready for a purge day? Are you locked and loaded?
Am I?
Yes, you have an arsenal.
I'm not ready for a purge day. All I have is like a broom and a
a
vac.
broom.
Yeah,
What are
the
you, a
vacuum
witch?
cleaner's got a pretty strong head on it, so I don't really have anything else. I don't like the idea of it though. Society could get out of hand.
Do you guys have a baseball bat in your house?
Actually, no, I do. I forgot. I
Yeah,
do.
I have a baseball bat. There was actually someone I wanted to hurt, and I was trying to coax him into coming onto my property so then I could use that baseball bat in quote unquote self defense. Uh, but yeah, I wasn't able to get him over.
What? Who is this?
Which
I
I,
don't even want to know.
Is this someone
but it's you should everyone. I think everyone should have a baseball bat in their house because for safety's sake, you can just grab it at nighttime if you hear noise.
yeah. You know, it's a little hack that I saw. If you have a baseball bat, you should put like a long sock around it.
What does that do?
So, like, if you try to hit someone and then they try to grab it, it'll just slide right off, and then you can hit them really hard again.
Holy shit,
Oh,
you're
interesting.
brilliant.
I
You're
know, right?
brilliant.
Get some pantyhose or something
Yes.
like that. And
Why do you know this?
I was thinking about having a purge day locally.
I knew it.
And it comes out, everyone. It comes out.
It's a good idea though. So if you have a bat, Robbie, you should do the same. Just
The, f-
put a long sock around it because you'll
the
still get.
fact that he's thought through this is kind of concerning. I'm just
Yes, there are a few bats in the house. Oh goodness. I don't even
so I, just to give you a, you know, Robbie would never consider harming anyone. She doesn't have any, thoughts in her mind of hurting other people, and it concerns me because I like her to be more like us.
Okay, so let's like be clear. First of all, I am an independent, registered, clearly. We've had this discussion about my grandfather being a Republican and growing up in a Republican household. Um, I have Democrats and Republicans within my family. There is a swath,
Hmm.
variety. Also, too, my family is from the South. My father had the shotguns in the house that I grew up with,
Wow.
firearms. I know how to shoot a gun. So does my daughter. Um, I'm not against. I'm not going to talk about what I have
Yeah.
presently, but what I will tell you is that it's one thing to murder someone in cold blood. It's another thing to murder someone in self-defense.
So are you saying you have an armory in your house?
I'm not telling you what I have. What I am telling you is that it is one thing to murder someone in cold blood, which I said I do not agree with. And there's another thing to if someone steps on your property, you had a bat. You can defend yourself,
You
and
can.
there is nothing wrong with that.
I've talked about this with my wife about having a gun because I feel like historically I've always been liberal. I think I still am, but maybe in today's world I might not be considered as liberal.
I don't think you are. I
No,
don't.
well, we'll get to that, but I do think because I asked my wife, well, should we just get a gun? And she's like, no, absolutely not. I said, well, what if someone comes into our house? And she's like, well, even if you shot them, you could still go to jail. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's, I think it's maybe a California thing. Like, it's not like
No, it has to be it's nationwide. It has to be an equal amount of force. It cannot. So if someone comes to you, if someone comes into your house just with his fists, if you shoot him, you could go to jail because you're using excessive force. If he's about twice your size, then maybe it would be justified. But it has to be determined that it was a justifiable amount of response that you
but
used against that intruder.
yeah, but let's say if it's 3 in the morning, someone's trying to break in, you can't see. It's a little bit dark. You don't know what they have or don't have, and
Yeah,
it's a very stressful situation. So of course, I'm not going to shoot to kill, but I'll shoot to hurt and then
Oh,
call the cops. You could still go to
yeah,
jail. It's like, what's the point of having a gun? Because you'll
yeah,
still get in trouble, right?
yeah,
And then your hands are at the at the mercy of the jury.
yeah.
That's the part that's like conflicting.
it depends on how good of a lawyer you have. It depends on how good of an argument they make. It depends on the circumstances. Like you, there's so many different types of circumstances. And yes, you can shoot to wound someone. You don't have to shoot to kill. But
Uh,
if
I mean,
someone comes in with guns, if people come in and it's an armed robbery, that's a whole different thing, right? So
uh,
I don't. I think there's a time and a place, and right to bear arms. People get caught up in that.
mm-hmm,
Doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't always too necessarily mean for it was around the whole militia piece,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Because of how the country was founded. And also too, people use guns and things for hunting as well. I know people don't like that conversation, but it is the truth.
Yep.
People do that as well. They use it for hunting. So I think we have to be very clear on that. If you do have a gun in your, and then there's people who, I have friends who are former police officers. They have guns in their homes, right? So I mean, at a certain point, you have to look at the context of the situation. That's my perspective.
Right. Yeah, I
Steve,
agree.
thanks,
I
Tim.
agree. I agree. Yes.
What? Steve,
I
okay?
I agree.
Are you just saying this?
I hate it when I agree with you, but I agree.
Okay, well, I'm on that note, I'm gonna shift to a conversation that I don't. This is here we go. So we're having a conversation about DEI and how a lot of corporations are reversing. This is our current event segment. Are reversing
This
their stance on DEI right now. And because we have Tim, who is someone who actually works in the space of human resources, I think I'm going to give you the floor, Tim.
and I do think it's important to mention that Tim is of South Asian origin, of sorry South Asian origin, and he is in a blue state. The company he works at is in a blue state. I mention these things because our background, our ethnicity, our heritage, our place of origin, the state we live in, uh, all of these things inform our decisions and the way we think, and the way our company thinks, and the way our companies create policies. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I think Tim's take is very interesting. But we have this thing about Walmart and Ford and Lowe's, Tractor Supply, several other companies that have been phasing out their DEI policies, phasing out DEI hires, phasing out their when their DEI policies on hiring vendors that are minority or marginalized individuals. So, Tim, why don't you give us your thoughts on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing?
Look, I think DEI is well intended. I think maybe the way that it's executed is probably not great. I think companies taking it out. I have mixed feelings, right? As much as I'm one to champion DEI, I think one of the things is it's hard. At the end of the day, companies are running a business, and it's hard to kind of link some of the DEI initiatives to the bottom line, and I think that's what makes it really hard.
Hmm.
I think when it comes to, like, say, recruiting, I've always felt passionate about wanting to have a diverse workforce. I think it is a good thing, but when you force fit, um, talent to come into the company that may look differently than you. Some people, I mean, there's like the opposite side. Some people will quietly say, "Oh, that person was hired because they're a DEI hire." I don't think that's right either. I think that's wrong. But I do think there are some systemic biases in some industries,
Did you
and
just say biases?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
why is that wrong?
I mean, no.
Biases.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there are some biases. If you look at example of like Hollywood as an entertainment industry, they talk a lot about DEI and being champions of it. But when you really look at these companies that are in this industry, it's not really that diverse. It's a lot of nepotism, a lot of people who are kids of really well off families and parents that are in the industry. Um, I think that that's also a problem. But I do think that I think for a lot of companies, there's been a lack of genuine commitment. I think after George Floyd's murder in 2020, I think companies may have felt like they were forced to do it, but now the pendulum has shifted the other way, where they're looking at the concerns around, is this effective? There's little evidence that it's actually working when it's actually not. So I don't know. It's a pretty complicated matter, but that's kind of my initial thought on it. What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this now: do you believe that white privilege exists?
Well, this is the thing. Like, how do you define privilege?
Well, let me get to what my point is. I feel that people, just out of, you know, people just normally receive advantages in different ways. Whether it's through because you've got a group of, for example, you've got a group of males that work at the company, and they interview a male and a female, and they say, "Oh, we don't want a woman working with us. We want one of the boys working with us." Or if there's a company interviewing someone with a disability, and they say, "Oh, we don't think that this person will be able to work fast enough." And of course, these aren't things that they're actually going to say outside of their little circle, but these are things that might happen. Or they interview someone of a race that's different than them, and they say, "Oh, we don't trust someone of this race to do a good job." And I think this happens pretty often. Um, and I think that people also get hired in because they're a friend of someone. I've seen this plenty of times. And these are definitely not qualified people for the job. And I think you both can agree that we work there. At least I have worked with a lot of idiots, that don't know how to do the jobs, but they get the job, and they're not intelligent people, unfortunately, and they're not the people I should have been hired for the job. So I think anytime we can um, help people that are marginalized, and say, well, if I'm interviewing, um, you know, someone from a group that's marginalized, or I'm looking to hire a vendor from a group that's marginalized, or a minority or woman owned, and I'm looking at different groups, different organizations to work with. I'm gonna I'm gonna work with the one that's marginalized because everyone else is already given advantages.
Well, I mean, I think like if you're looking at, uh, so I get what you're saying about white privilege. I think it'd be foolish to say no. There is absolutely no white privilege, but I don't think that means that just because you're not white, you can't do well, right? I mean, some I've had this like kind of friendly
But there's
debate.
the perception, which is what causes white privilege. There's the
The
and
perception.
there's a perception that maybe someone of another race cannot do as good a job, or there's a perception that just because someone's white, they're one of us, so we want to hire our kind.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I think there are some groups, there could be biases if you're, let's say, black or Latino, certainly, or if you're a woman. Like if a woman speaks up and speaks confidently, or is really hard on her team, they'll refer to her as a bitch. But if
Mhm,
it's a man, they might say, well, he's just really tough. But a woman doesn't get that. They'll be like, she's just a nasty woman or
mhm,
something like that. I do think that there, of course, is some privilege, but the issue I have with that mentality is that it almost like kind of creates this like it can seem a little divisive, right? Just because someone is white, maybe they came from the school of hard knocks, they came from a socioeconomically a very disadvantaged place. But then you can also, let's say, have a black person whose father was a big shot in Manhattan or LA or San Francisco, and well, is that really diverse? Because they also grew up in a place that socioeconomically they weren't. But is it the color of their skin? I don't know. I mean, you look at, like, let's say executives in Silicon Valley, right? Many of these CEOs are not white people; they're
mhm.
Indian origin.
Yeah.
So you could argue, well, should you hire based off of just purely DEI, or should you hire based on what this new acronym? Have you heard of MEI? It's like
No.
merit, excellence. I forget what the other one is now. Merit, excellence, and intelligence. And so there are proponents that argue that you should be hiring based on merit. It'll lead to naturally varied backgrounds and perspectives. Um, but and casting a wide recruiting net is important. But if you just kind of force fit with DEI, that doesn't work well. And there was this guy that talked about it. If you're going to Harvard Law, you know, um, or let's say Harvard undergrad, Asian students are actually disadvantaged. I think they make up something like 19 or 20% of the student body, but if it was truly based off of merit, they would make up 43 or 45% of the student body. And
Mhm.
so I don't know. You look at that like, well, should there be DEI for that? I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one because I'm all for like merit, but sometimes you come from a disadvantaged background. Should they be given a seat to go to Harvard if they don't really have the merit?
No, I agree with you there. If they are not qualified for the job, they should not be hired for it. That's a given. But I do think there should be programs that promote hiring of minorities or people of different marginalized groups.
But how do you? I mean, one of the things I struggle with, and I've been as much of a champion for diversity, is how do you, connect that to the bottom line? Because that's the part I think a lot of executives have is like, yeah, that person seems like they're okay, and of course they have to overcome their own biases, but people are saying that it's hard to link it to a business outcome, and I think that's the
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately they are required to link it to a business outcome, right? That's unfortunate, but it's a fact of, running a business.
I don't know. What do you think, Robbie?
Oh, I was just letting you all have the conversation.
Well, yeah, what do you think about this, Robbie? Come on, don't be shy. I know you have things to say. I
I'm not
know. I know.
okay. I'm letting you. You continuing to talk.
Can I ask you a somewhat personal question, Tim?
Sure.
Have you ever oh, well, actually, let me take a step back. What is your company's policy on DEI?
I mean, I think everyone, like in every organization, you talk about, yes, of course, DEI is important. I think it's just like how is it executed, right? I think if you're, let's say, in the HR organization or recruiting, you can only do so much. Ultimately, if the exec wants to make a hire, they're going to make their hire. Um, so I don't know if I'm answering your question. What was the exact question?
Well, so and correct
Oh,
me if I'm assuming you're the one at your company that leads the policies and policy changes. Is that correct?
yeah, I mean, I think so. Some of the things that I've looked at is like we should be going to So one thing that I looked at, we should be going after universities, particularly HBCUs, who I know have a ton of really sharp people. We should be going there. Let's cast a wider net too. That we're not just going to schools in, the Bay Area, LA, or New York or Boston, but we should look at diversity also comes from HBCUs, other schools in the South that are great. That's also giving access and opportunity because if you're, let's say, a gay black student in Alabama, they have no ties to like Silicon Valley or Hollywood or even New York for the investment banking world. I
Yeah.
think that's where companies need to invest because there are talented people there.
Hmm.
But I think diversity takes time, right? It's not just what you're also seeing is organizations are diverse at the lower levels, and it starts to drop off once you get to senior ranks. But
Hmm.
I think people have to recognize is that we have we try to adopt what the NFL did with the Rooney Rule. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So like interviewing head coaches that okay, if we're gonna interview, let's have a diverse candidate slate. So it'll be black, Latino, white, South Asian, and then once you interview your candidates that are in that diverse pipeline, then you can make a decision. I think that's how you get there, and then of course it takes time. You have to develop the talent, groom them. Someone has to champion them, advocate for them. That all can take a few years. So I don't know. I think organizations can still do a better job of recruiting at some of these great universities, but then
Hmm.
really like supporting that talent once in their organization.
That actually that sounds like a good plan. So, and let me ask you this. So, am I correct that you do not have specific DEI
We
training or DEI activities that where you're specifically for DEI, where you have a hiring program or you have a partnership program for DEI specifically pertaining to DEI or your vendor programs. You don't have a specific DEI program
we
for them.
we do now because a couple of years, more than a couple of years ago, we set out a vision of like, here's what the organization looks like. So you try to tell the story with data. Like, here's the kind of the baseline where we're at. Here's what we aspire to be in the 1, 3, 5 year kind of time frame. And then I'd say, look, here's how we're going to architect that vision, but this is what we need from like the leadership team to help execute. So we do, I mean, things like vendor support. I actively get out there to find, um, you know, uh, women-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, Latin-owned businesses. Um, so we do have that. I think when it comes to hiring, I think that is where we could do a little bit of a better job, um, because we still have some work to do. And part of that is also like how much of a fight do I put up, right? I mean, I've noticed that there could be some biases where, oh, this person, they'll come up with some excuse, and maybe there's some validity to it. I'd like to think that most of these people, they're not outrightly, overtly racist. I
Yeah.
think there may be some bias as to why they think someone might not be a right fit. But you know
And
how
we all have our own biases, right?
everybody, I know I have biases, like you, and whether they're good or not so good. And sometimes we like to hire people who kind of think like us, maybe talk like us, act like
Yeah,
us.
right,
So
right.
that plays a big role.
Yeah,
I don't think like the leadership team is racist, but I do think that
right.
these are all biases that exist.
So I'm going to say this because there's so much that I could say,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't
Say
have
it.
enough time to talk about it. What I am going to say is this. Do you guys know who, you may not like him, but he's a professor and he has two podcasts, Scott Galloway.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
So he says he doesn't believe in a lot of the DEI stuff that's on campus. But what he does say, and he said this on a podcast just this week, is that if you have a company like Nike that's selling to the majority of their sales go to marginalized groups,
Mm-hmm.
and the entire board is white men,
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem. He
Mm-hmm.
said that. He is a white man. He said
Mm-hmm.
that. So I kind of think that what happens sometimes is what you said. People get sort of, what is it, confirmation bias.
Exactly, that's the right word.
And they like to be around people who confirm the things that they believe in. And I think that when you do say that you are quote unquote having targets or certain things, people get bent out of shape. And the reason why I think people get bent out of shape for the most part, and you brought up the fact that there are a lot of Indian CEOs in tech, which is true. And we obviously have Jensen, who is Asian, and who's the CEO of NVIDIA. He's not Indian, but he's Asian. I think is he Chinese or Taiwanese? I'm not sure.
Sure.
Uh,
It's probably all the same to you, isn't it, Robbie?
no, it's not. That's why I'm making a clarification of which
So
one.
easy to confuse.
No, it's not. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure, but I'm putting them both out there.
I'm
So I
teasing.
know that you're trying to like rattle
Teasing.
me, but it's not.
Taiwanese.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
He's Taiwanese. Okay, so
Taiwanese have boba.
Yeah.
China does not, so they're better.
my
Yeah.
point is that you have these people who are of these backgrounds, and then you can say, well, everybody is not all quote unquote a white man, which is true. But my question to you is, how many of the people who are white and of Asian background actually have personal deep relationships with more than five people in un and marginalized groups? And I'm talking about friends, personal relationships, inviting them to your house, inviting to events that you have, parties or celebrations, even in your own cultural
Mhm.
foray, weddings, baby showers, um, people that you just hang out with outside of work, more than five. I'm not talking about that one friend you might have. I'm talking about more. And I'm talking about a consistent relationship that you're building with people who are making these types of decisions as to who has merit and who does not. I would argue that you would find that number to be quite low.
The question is, how many of those like execs have personal friendships outside of work that are of a different background?
Not of a different background. of marginalized
Oh,
groups.
marginalized
And I
background.
don't like that word marginalized group
Yeah.
because that also too feeds into the bias that people who are marginalized don't have merit and are not qualified.
We'll also say like underrepresented groups.
I don't understand sometimes why people can't say who they are and it's an issue. Because here's the thing, particularly people who are Black and Indian, when you come into a room, you don't really have to say that you are that. People see it, right?
Yeah.
So if people see it, then why is it an issue? And so
What do you mean?
I mean, why is it an issue? Why is there a question about we need to hire qualified candidates? Okay. But if you come in and you bring and you say, I'm going to have this person who's Black or Latino or something, then it's like we're not having qualified candidates. But why is that? Why do you assume that that person is not qualified? Is it because of the naming? Is it because we have all of these labels? Is it because people are um, uncomfortable when people actually say, this is who I am? Like, I feel like if you have personal relationships, this goes back to my point of actually having people in your home in events that are personal to you. Because when you're a parent, you can relate to other parents. When you're married, you can relate to other married people. But for some reason, when we talk about racial identities and we talk about racial identities in the conversations around work and promotions and schooling, it's uncomfortable. There's quote unquote, people get uncomfortable with seeing where there are relatabilities in those types of scenarios. And I wonder sometimes if that comes back to people not having enough personal relationships with the same people who they feel are not qualified.
I'm sure that's a lot of it is that. I mean, you think about the whole interview process is kind of like a farce, right? Tim, what are your, you know, I'm not a fan of the interview process.
I mean, I think it's of course it's biased, and most people like to think that they're great at interviewing candidates, but they're actually not. It's again, it goes
Yes.
back to Robbie's
Yeah.
point. It's like you're looking for that confirmation bias, and so it's not a great way. And there was a study too that if you looked at a resume, and let's say the name at the top is John Smith, went to MIT, worked at company X, Y, and Z, but then you change the name out to like Demonte or not, yeah, Demonte Smith. There's a bias where, well, I don't know if that candidate is as strong, but there is a bias. Like you see the name,
Yes. I've read
oh,
about
that's I think that can play a role, and one doesn't realize it. So there's been a talk about, well, should we look at resumes blindly without the name?
that.
Because if you look at the
Interesting.
name, that could kind of, and it could be any name. It could be like, Juan Rodriguez. It could be like Dharmesh Shah. Like it just feeds into that. So I do see how that can be an issue. But, you know, that starts with the recruiter, and then you don't know if you make it out to the interview. Um,
Yeah.
so there's got to be a way to get around that. But I don't know. I think like most people are well intended. I think most people do agree that diversity is a good thing. There's studies that say that it makes organizations more profitable and stronger. Um,
But I don't think people necessarily, well, I should say this. I think that some people don't necessarily believe those studies because then they go back and say that they can't prove outcome.
yeah, and I
If
one of
those
the things I've
studies,
thought is
then why aren't those studies showing outcomes? But they don't believe the studies. So then like there's that piece. But I want to go back to my point about the personal relationships.
yeah,
Like how many you two Southeast Asian backgrounds
Not Southeast.
or
Man, I feel like
South
you don't even know me.
Okay.
Look at that.
How many relationships do you have with people who are quote unquote in marginalized groups who you have really close relationships with? Where, like I said, you're inviting them to your house, you invite them to your wedding, you invite them to your baby shower, you
basically like people
out.
who are not your race, essentially.
Yeah.
I
Not
mean,
no, not just not your race. I'm talking about quote unquote, and I say quote unquote because I don't like the term underrepresented,
yeah.
marginalized. I'm talking about those communities.
Well, I think the thing that the natural human tendency is s- to to try to connect with people that are as similar as possible to you. That's our natural tendency as humans, and it takes work to reach outside of that bubble, and that's a problem right there.
Well, I think that that's the reason why a lot of these programs are created because of what you just said, right? If people aren't doing that,
Right.
they have a natural tendency to do that, then you're constantly just going to be creating an environment with the same type of people. So, if you're not going to do those types of things, then go back to the fundamental. Are people going to try to actually get to know people and realize that, maybe there's a lot more they have in common if they know them on a personal level? Again, this is just a question.
I mean, I guess some people are just not. It's not like to the quote unquote underrepresented group. They're like, I don't have time for this. I'm comfortable with my friends. I don't really
Yeah.
need to go out there. I also hear the other side where, it's if people just don't want to spend their time on it. I remember one friend saying to another friend, like, "Oh, I'm an anti-racist, and I'm calling you out." Someone's like, "I'm not a racist." They're like, "That's the problem. You need." They're like, "Look, I don't." The idea or mindset from this other friend was like, "Look, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm too busy with other stuff. I don't want to be, you know." Putting time and energy in this, it's important, but it's not important. It's not in my top three most important things right now.
Hmm.
So I can understand that perspective. Like, okay, I get that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's a good question though about like under quote unquote underrepresented groups. I mean, I feel like I've had friends, but I guess the question is how close.
That's my point. How
Yeah,
close? Because at
Tim's like, I feel like I've had one gay friend in the past. I, I can.
I,
but
I, I mean, some margin. Well, I don't like the word marginalized, but some marginalized group. There's such a small population. Like I might maybe know like a small handful of like transgender folks, but and I get along with them great. Some of which I've hired, but it's not that I wouldn't invite them to my house because I don't want a transgender in my house. It's just I don't know what instance they would come to my house. And then if I had questions to learn about them, I also feel like, hey, their experience is quite personal. I don't even know if they would want to share that, so I wouldn't ask.
You wouldn't, Tim? I
I
from
I think
I
like
find that surprising.
with just like with some of my friends who are gay, I will ask very stupid questions because I'm
Yes, yes,
genuinely
you would.
curious.
Yes.
But because I'm really close to them. But with let's say a
that's my
transgender,
point. You're really close to them. Like it
I'm
evolved.
closer.
You
But
could,
I don't.
Well,
But I feel like now we live in a world where if you ask questions, it could be taken wrongly. Someone will be like, "Why are you So you almost don't like. And the percentage of people out there is pretty low, right? We'll talk about the transgender group. It's such a low percentage that like, uh,
well,
why is it?
no, no, no. I'm just saying like you picked that group, but let's say like Latino people,
yeah,
people
Yeah,
who are of Latino descent. I hate that Latinx thing because that's not real,
yeah.
yeah,
right? But like people who are of Latino, people say Hispanic, etc.
Well,
background, like you can just have a conversation with someone, and then they eventually become your friend, and then you invite
yeah.
them places just like you do your other friends. This is what I'm like,
especially
I
who
think
is that?
especially if she's a hot Latina.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right.
You can come over to my
Well, I mean,
house.
I have, I do, and I have had, let's say, a Latin friend and his family come over. I think it's kind of interesting that you brought this up because I remember one organization I worked at.
And I said multiple, not one. And that's
Yeah,
my
well,
point is that if we did that, right, then
yeah,
maybe some of this stuff would not be so contentious.
agreed.
But
I
the
think you're right.
idea is that we do not. And because we do not, then what do you do?
We had this diversity training at work, and this was like I think after this whole George Floyd thing. So there was a lot of talk, if you might remember, like 4 or 5 years ago, about well, got to get to know your black colleagues, their brothers and sisters, and understanding a day in the life of their shoes. And so I remember like one.
Stuff is so, I'm sorry to cut you off. that's like, okay, see, this is the stuff that people get pissed off about the DEI stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because that seems so freaking fake. Let's
Yeah.
know your black colleagues and see what their life is like. What the fuck does that mean? Like,
I
that's
know.
not how people interact with people. That's not how people engage, become friends, etc. Right?
Did
Yeah.
Robbie just pull out the F
People,
word?
Yeah.
yes, I did.
Robbie's getting passionate.
I mean, I think with one of my friends at work who happened to be black, I just asked him questions because I think we were already friends at that point. So it's not like I said, "Hey, tell me about like your black experience." Like
Exactly.
it was more about, okay, hey man, like this thing. Part of it was like my own. I'll admit it. Like I was maybe a little bit skeptical when people say, "Well, black people have it harder with the police." So I asked him because he's my friend. Like I asked Steven, I'm like, hey man, like real talk. I know we're friends here, but is this thing like what the media's saying? Like when they talk about like how black kids are raised, like their parents tell them if you pulled over by a cop, the parents tell them you got to put your hands on both wheels because they're afraid of getting shot. I was like, did that ever happen? He's like, absolutely. I said, holy crap. Okay. Next step was, have you ever been like approached by a cop? And I've asked like multiple black friends this. I said, absolutely. They're like, I'm driving or I'm like running around in a neighborhood just doing my jog, and a cop will stop me saying, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm going on my jog. I'm like, are you serious? Like, I was almost in disbelief because it's never happened to me. And I feel like, okay, if I'm brown, I feel like, it's not the same as of the black experience. Multiple of my friends have said, yeah. And I think it's because somebody in the neighborhood must have called the police saying, hey, there's a black guy running in my neighborhood. And when I started hearing these stories, I genuinely started feeling bad. And I started feeling bad at how I thought, like, no, I don't think this is true. I think the media is just exaggerating it. But when you hear it like 2, 3, 4 times, you're like, well, shit, maybe there really is like some level of, I don't know, perceived racism that's out there. And then, you maybe feel a little bit more empathetic and compassionate to their experience. But that's just kind of like, I think the whole George Floyd thing kind of sparked that. But I had friendships with them, so it's not like it was forced. I wouldn't ask other colleagues about their experience, but I did find that to be eye opening.
So to that point, right? Like that's the really kind of mundane thing that happens within the black community, I would say, for particularly black men and even black women too, followed around stores and that sort of thing when you walk in. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And it doesn't matter. And I think to your point about how you could have somebody who is from a white rural background who has struggled. Yeah, they definitely, and they're working hard and they have a shot and they interview and they're killing it. Yeah, if they're qualified, give them the job, right?
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
point, the other side of it, if you have somebody from a black background who is from a well-to-do background and they're good and they go outside and they're jogging down the street, that police officer doesn't know what their background is. They just see them. And I think that's kind of the difference, right? It's I think the visual cues unfortunately come with a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And are people the only way people are going to, and this is just my opinion and a question, I feel like the only way people could get by that is because um they get to know people,
Hmm.
right? Get to know people as individuals. And I can say this because my background, and I have a family with mixed relatives. I have black relatives, I have white relatives, I have Latino relatives. I have multiple people in my family who have different backgrounds and they're in my family, right? So there's kind of like you have to do what you have to do in terms of how you communicate with people in your family.
Hmm.
So
Robbie, one
is
quick question. You said you have Latino relatives. Are any of them, by any chance, like cute Latina chicks that you could introduce me to?
so
Robbie,
you have to communicate with your family. And no, Stephen, no.
yeah,
Okay. My
if by
point,
chance, don't forget your buddy Steven.
if you try to
Steven is a
know
uncontrolled
people,
breeder.
I
Keep him
know,
away.
I I know. He can't stop it. Um, so I wonder though, but I do think also too, my first husband was first generation. His family was, they were immigrants. So the conversation sometimes about certain people who were in this country, right, of a certain background, it was different. Like there's a lot of unfortunate bias, even in immigrant communities, about the hierarchy here, about like what they feel about unmarginalized groups here in America when they
Yeah.
come here, and who to be around and who not to be around and who to stay away from and who to talk to and who to fraternize with and who's going to allow you to move up faster and who won't. So, like, all of those things are really complicated. And I think that when people get to know people, they realize that, some people in some backgrounds are fucked up and some people are not. And that's across the spectrum. But you can't really, like, have a non racial judgment on something that's based in race. I think it's becomes really difficult, right? Because you're even starting the conversation, well, we're going to be colorblind, but yet there's all these people with different color. Like it's both sides, and then the other side is I'm going to be anti-racist and you're not talking about it. What's wrong with you? It's like when
Yeah.
I'm trying to do my job to get some groceries, right? Like it's so I feel like getting to know people is the first step.
But
And I
I do want to point out that the
try to do that.
ability, the a lot of people don't have access to a diverse group of people. So I can
Well,
tell
then
you that.
there's that.
I'm sorry.
I said, and then there's that. Like, why is that? Like, why don't people have access to
I
a diverse group of people?
For one example, strictly just the city you live in. I can say that I used to live in a city that was extremely diverse, more probably the most diverse city in the country. Which you're not going to get that experience anywhere else in the country. So and there, and Tim could correct me if I'm, I feel that when I am in one of the cities like that, or if I'm just generally, if I'm interviewing for a job in a blue state, I feel that using my ethnicity will help me get the job. But if I'm in a red state interviewing for a job, I feel like that's going to hurt me. Do you feel that way?
Hmm. I don't. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I try not to take on the kind of the mindset of like I might be a victim. I might feel differently when I'm in like rural Missouri.
Yeah.
It might feel weird like if I'm at a diner, but if I'm interviewing, I feel like okay, these are educated people. Maybe it's not going to be that bad. I think it also depends on the industry, right?
Yeah.
Some industries are a little bit more progressive than others, but if you're like in a manufacturing line in the middle of Ohio, maybe it's not as diverse. But
Yeah.
I think some of these more knowledge based workers that we are, I think it's pretty diverse.
Okay. But we just yeah, I think access to uh having a diverse scenario is it's not an even playing field. And I think that contributes to biases, but and those aren't biases that have been created intentionally. It's just because of the environment you're living in.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to go travel state lines to try to find a specific kind of person so I can get to know what it's like.
Well,
Yeah,
but you are
no,
traveling though. You can get to know people. And the other thing is sometimes you just need to give people the benefit of the doubt in a good side versus assuming things based on ideas, right? There's so many ideas out there that, and I'm going to say one that is pretty clear, that quality and high qualifications equal someone who is not necessarily in a marginalized group. Like that is something that people they don't say it, But that's kind of the underlying implication. Well, we got to have qualified people, right? But then on the other side, you look at that like, hey, I don't think Matt Gaetz was qualified to be the
Right.
head of the DOJ.
Yeah.
However, I would argue that that's a DI that he was a DEI candidate in another way.
I think. I
So it's
think.
just
I think Tim would argue that Matt Gaetz was qualified.
No, I do not think he was.
I was gonna say, Tim, we're about to go toe to toe right now.
No, he's definitely not. He's definitely not qualified. Definitely not. And he had a lot of problems and whatnot. But when you talk about this political landscape, some people like to think that Donald Trump is racist. If I look at his cabinet from his first administration to who he's appointing now, to me it looks pretty diverse. I think.
I think he is not racist towards Indians or people of Indian origin, but he is racist generally speaking.
What do you mean? Like he doesn't? He had I forget his name. He was that surgeon. He's a black doctor
Oh,
guy.
that complete idiot! That
He's an
space.
idiot. He's like a neurosurgeon. He was.
He
He
was a
was
space.
and then there was
I
Tim Scott.
would be.
So he had Tim Scott. He had didn't Omarosa like him? I'm kidding.
This is exactly, look at these people.
Come on, man. Okay, Ben. His name is Ben something. The neurosurgeon.
Ben
guy.
Carson.
Ben Carson.
Yeah.
He
So
is a
he had
world
people. He had
renowned.
an Asian woman, but he had the Treasury Secretary.
Yeah,
It's
you're
a
right.
man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, well, is that racist? Like, or I don't think he's misogynist. I think he says the thing is, I
You
think
don't
Trump.
think Donald Trump is okay? Here's the thing. I'm fine with people supporting Donald Trump. That's what you want to support. You support Trump. I understand why, because Stephen and I argue about this all the time. I totally understand why people voted for Trump. I said in the beginning that I thought he was going to win. I understand it, right? But there's certain things that you gotta say about the guy. The stuff that
Yes,
he says about women and the stuff that he says about people of color is freaking ignorant. I think he knows it's ignorant, but
I
just
think
doesn't care.
I
I
think he.
mean,
So
I
my personal take on it, and I say this as someone who I've always been, I describe myself as a independent, but I've only historically ever voted Democrat. Um, I think I don't believe that Donald Trump truly is a racist. I don't believe that. I think he does say things that are inflammatory, that are kind of insane. Um, but I think he definitely, and I'm not one of those. I don't want to even brand myself as a Trump supporter, but did I vote for him this time? Yeah, I voted for him because Kamala was terrible.
There we have it. There we have it. Let me.
But I
Do you
think like
think?
look, the
Do you
guy
think it's
says things that are
coincidence? Do you
no.
think
But
it's
look. Here's the thing: if you interview him and you're a white cisgender male, and you approach him from an adversarial position and you don't respect him, he's gonna throw you in the trash. But
This
if
is
you're
true.
that same person who approaches him the same way, and let's say you're a Latina woman or an Asian woman or a black woman, he'll throw you in the trash, and people say, "Oh, now he's a misogynist. Now he's a racist." I'm like, no, he basically does not care. I believe. I don't think he cares what color, race, what you are, as long as you're on his team and you are loyal to him. That's all he cares about. I think that's his world. Now, this whole like Puerto Rico and the trash comment that the comedian made, he was a little off the rails, but I think people ultimately look the other way. They're like, look, that's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine, but they look the other way and they're like, I'm voting on the policy because they didn't think Kamala was capable, and that's why they lost. And also, this not to go on a whole diatribe here, but I think the Democrats have gone way too far left, and so people are getting tired of it. I think. I mean, I've talked to so many people who are anti-Trump, and then they voted Trump this time. I'm like literally surprised by the
Yeah.
types of people who voted for him.
Yeah. There were so many factors that played into the Democrats losing.
Yeah, I don't want to go into that. We were talking about DEI. I don't want to go into the whole like race.
Uh,
I mean the loss of the political race because
but
we
I,
did that, and we're at 1 hour and 22 minutes.
let me just ask this one quick
This
question.
is so fun, though.
Tim, Tim,
It's so fun.
You got to
Tim,
come
let me
back,
ask you.
Tim. You got to come back.
Do you,
I'll definitely will come back.
Tim? Do you think? And I'll leave you with this. Do you think that it was purely coincidental that Donald Trump, during a couple of his rallies, wore the colors of the Proud Boys in his outfit? Do you think it was purely coincidental?
What do you mean the Proud Boys? You mean like the gay Proud Boys or the Proud Boys of this other?
Yeah, this other racist group. He was wearing their colors. His whole outfit was gold and
What were those
white and
colors?
black.
I'm not familiar with that. What colors were those?
It's gold and black, and I think it's a little bit of white. But his whole outfit was the color. Even his hat was the color of their uniform.
Where was this and when was it?
Oh, I'll have to look it up. But it was
Oh,
one or two of his rallies. But
I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's a marketing machine. So like even when they made whatever it is to him, there's no media is bad, no bad media is, or no media is bad media. How does that phrase go? Or press. There's no such thing as bad press,
yeah,
essentially. So like when they had the comedian made that joke about like the Puerto Rico, the next day he comes with a garbage truck. Now I think he's not trying to say that they're garbage, but he got in the press and then he was trying to respond to, Joe Biden and saying that his support base is a bunch of trash. The guy's just clamoring for like media attention, and it worked to his advantage.
yeah. There's no doubt.
I
No
don't know
doubt.
if it shows like the ugly underbelly of our society, and I'm not one of those people that's like, "Oh my God, Trump is like the greatest thing ever." It's kind of like, it's kind of a no other choice.
Well, I do think that, and I'm going to end the call on this statement. I do think that it does show whatever underbelly, whatever it is. I think that people are too, honestly, I think people are lazy and don't want to dig deep work in terms of understanding things. People want to have immediate impact in all areas of their lives because that's how we live now.
Hmm.
And if that means I'm going to vote for somebody who says they're going to put some more money in my pocket so that I can have some groceries, even if I think that this person is a racist, which some people do, because I know people who voted for him who think that he is a racist, I'm going to do that because at least I know where I stand. At
Hmm.
least I know he doesn't like me, but I still have to get food on my table. And unfortunately, that's really a pretty shitty place to be when
It
you're
is. It
trying
is.
to vote for somebody to be the free leader of the world, right?
Yeah,
That's really,
Yeah.
I think that that's what it uncovers. We're at 125. We cannot go on longer.
got it.
We won't have
We will
people
continue this.
podcast.
TBD.
So, thank you everybody for joining. Tim, this was an amazing discussion. You've got to come back in a couple
I
of
will.
Thank
something.
you, Tim.
And Stephen, say goodbye to the people.
Steven, thanks for
Goodbye, my friends. Goodbye. It was wonderful spending this quality time with you. Thank
And
you, Tim.
for this weekend, check out Orgasm and Skin.
Orgasm.
Yeah.
Oh
All
my
right.
God.
Orgasm with the Skin.